I still check the locks on my apartment door 3 times before I go to bed. 1, 2, 3. It's a ritual now, a tic I see not shake. My therapist says it's a trauma response, a way of exerting control over an environment that once felt uncontrollable. Maybe she's right, but she did not smell what I smelled. She did not hear the sound of a zipper slowly, agonizingly sliding down when there was nobody else for 20 miles. It started in November of 2023. The ink was barely dry on the divorce papers. Sarah got the house in Raleigh, the dog, and primary custody of the twins. I got the freedom I thought I wanted and a 1-bedroom apartment that smelled like bachelor's despair. A mix of fresh paint and takeout curry. I was 38 years old, a project manager for a mid-sized logistics firm, and I felt like my life was dissolving into gray sludge. I needed a win. I needed to feel like a man again, not just a visitor in my own children's lives. I've always been a gearhead. There's something soothing about the hyper-specificity of outdoor equipment. The engineering. The promise that if you just buy the right object, you will survive the elements. I spent 2 weeks researching before the trip. I did not just want to camp. I wanted to execute a tactical operation of leisure. I took Friday off work. I remember the weather forecast on my iPhone 14 Pro as I packed the car. High of 52. Low of 34. Clear skies. Perfect. I drive a 2021 Subaru Outback, the Wilderness Edition with the geyser blue paint. I spent an hour that morning just organizing the trunk. I am meticulous like that. That's how I cope. If the physical world is ordered, the internal world might follow suit. I laid out my sleep system. A Nemo Disco 15 sleeping bag, bright orange and shaped like a spoon for side sleepers. A Therma Rest Neo Air Xtherm sleeping pad, the one that sounds like a bag of potato chips when you roll on it, but has an R value high enough to keep you warm on a glacier. I packed the cooler, a Yeti Tundra 45 that costs more than my first car did. Inside, I did not pack hot dogs. I packed ribeyes from Whole Foods, vacuum sealed. I packed 6 bottles of Craft IPA, Wicked Weed Pernicious, and a carton of cage-free eggs for breakfast. This was not survival. This was glamping for one. I pulled out of my complex at 9 o'clock a.m., stopping at the Sheets Off exit 24 for gas and coffee. I remember the smell of that gas station, burnt hazelnut coffee and floor cleaner. I bought a bag of Jack Link's teriyaki beef jerky and a large bottle of Smart Water. The cashier, a kid with acne and a name tag that said Braden, did not even look up from his phone. I wanted to tell him, I am going into the wild. I am doing something real. But I just tapped my card and left. The drive west on I-40 is usually a nightmare. But that Friday, the traffic parted like the Red Sea. I had a podcast playing, Hardcore History by Dan Carlin. His voice, talking about the fall of the Assyrian Empire, filled the cabin. I felt good. For the first time in 6 months, the knot in my chest loosened. I tapped the steering wheel to the rhythm of the tires on the asphalt. By the time I hit the Brevard exit, the landscape had changed. The rolling Piedmont hills jutted upward into the jagged, blue-hazed spine of the Appalachians. The trees were past peak color, mostly skeletal browns and grays, stripping the mountains down to their rocky anatomy. I was not heading for a campground. I did not want to hear RV generators or smell someone else's lighter fluid. I was heading for a dispersed camping site off Forest Service Road 475B. It's a gravel track that winds up the backside of Looking Glass Rock. No toilets, no water hookups, no cell service, just you and the woods. I turned off the pavement around 1 o'clock p.m. The Subaru handled the gravel easily, the suspension eating up the washboards. I rolled the window down. The air that rushed in was crisp, smelling of wet leaves and pine resin. It was 48 degrees according to the dashboard thermometer. I drove for about 4 miles, passing the popular spots near the bottom where the college kids from Brevard usually clustered. I kept going, climbing higher. The road narrowed, the rhododendron thickets pressing in on both sides, scraping against the doors of the car. Scritch, scritch. I found the spot I had scouted on Google Earth. It was perfect. A small clearing on a ridge, maybe 50 yards off the service road, overlooking a deep ravine. I killed the engine. Silence. That S the first thing that hits you. When the engine stops and the podcast cuts out, the silence rushes in like water filling a vacuum. My ears actually rang for a moment, adjusting to the lack of input. I stepped out of the car, my boots, Solomon Quest 4D GTX, barely broken in, crunching on the gravel. I stretched, hearing my back pop. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that cold, clean air. Okay, I said aloud. My voice sounded flat, instantly absorbed by the trees. Let us do this. Setting up camp is a ritual. It's a sequence of logical steps that I find deeply comforting. Clear the ground of sticks and rocks. Lay down the footprint. Spread the tent body. I was using an MSR Hubba Hubba NX 2-person tent. It's lightweight, gray and red. I snapped the aluminum poles together, that satisfying click-clack of magnetic aluminum finding its home. I threaded the clips, popped the rainfly on, and staked it out taut. I stood back and admired it. A little bubble of civilization in the chaos of nature. It was around 3:30 p.m. when the feeling first hit me. I was gathering firewood. You see, not bring wood in from out of state because of invasive beetles, so you have to scavenge. I had walked maybe 100 yards from the campsite, down a slight slope into the denser tree line. The ground was spongy here, covered in layers of decaying hemlock needles. I bent down to pick up a fallen branch, a nice thick piece of oak that would burn slow. As my hand touched the rough bark, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. It was not a gradual feeling. It was instant, primal, the sensation of being watched. I froze, my hand still gripping the wood. I did not turn around immediately. I listened. The wind moved through the upper canopy, a soft rushing sound like distant ocean waves. A squirrel chattered somewhere to my left. Normal sounds. Rationalize it, I told myself. You've been living in a city for 10 years. You just not used to the openness. You hyper-aware. I stood up slowly and turned in a circle. The forest was a kaleidoscope of vertical gray trunks and green rhododendron leaves. Nothing moved. No flash of a deer's tail. No black shape of a bear. Hello, I called out. I felt stupid immediately. Who was I talking to? A bear was not going to answer, but the silence that followed my voice felt heavy, felt withheld. I shook my head, laughing nervously. Get a grip, Mark, I muttered. I grabbed the wood and headed back to camp, walking a little faster than I needed to. By 5:00 p.m., the sun was dipping below the ridgeline. In the mountains, twilight does not last long. The shadows stretch out, turning from gray to purple to black in the span of 30 minutes. The temperature was dropping fast. I could see my breath now, little puffs of steam dissipating in the lantern light. I started the fire. I used a ferro rod and some dryer lint I'd brought in a Ziploc bag. Another little survivalist trick I'd learned on YouTube. The lint caught a spark instantly, flaring up orange. I fed it twigs, then larger sticks until I had a decent blaze going in the stone ring. I sat on my Helinox Chair Zero, a ridiculous thing that weighs less than a pound but costs $150, and opened my first beer. The IPA was cold, bitter, and citrusy. I took a long pull, letting the alcohol warm my stomach. Dinner was the ribeye. I set up my cast iron skillet on the grate over the fire. I threw in a knob of Kerrygold butter and a sprig of rosemary I'd brought wrapped in a damp paper towel. When the butter foamed, I laid the steak down. SSSSZZZT. The sound was domestic, comforting. The smell of searing beef and garlic filled the clearing, masking the scent of the damp earth. For a moment, I forgot the weird feeling in the woods. I was just a man cooking a steak. I was the master of my domain. I ate straight from the skillet, cutting pieces with my Benchmade pocket knife. It was the best steak I'd had in years. Maybe it was the hunger or the cold or just the satisfaction of making it myself. After dinner, I cleaned up meticulously. This is bear country, after all. I put the trash in a scent-proof OPSAC bag, wiped down the skillet, and locked everything that smelled like food inside the Subaru. I was not going to be the idiot who gets mauled because he left a Snickers wrapper in his tent. I checked the car doors. Locked. I checked the trunk. Locked. I went back to the fire. It was 7:30 p.m., but it felt like midnight. The darkness beyond the ring of firelight was absolute. It was a physical wall. I threw another log on, craving the light more than the heat. I pulled out my Kindle to read, but I could not focus on the words. I found myself staring over the top of the screen, scanning the tree line. That S when I smelled it. At first, I thought it was the wind shifting the smoke. But wood smoke smells sharp and clean. This was different. It was sweet, cloying. It smelled like cheap cologne. Something musky and floral like Brut or Old Spice, but layered over something else. Something underneath that smelled like wet copper, like old pennies, or blood. I lowered the Kindle. My heart started to hammer against my ribs. Logic. Used logic. Had a hiker walked by on the road? The road was 50 yards away. Maybe someone drove past with their windows down, but I had not heard a car. The smell got stronger. It was not drifting. It was arriving. Then I heard the crunch. It was distinct. The sound of a heavy boot coming down on dry leaves. Not the scamper of a squirrel or the shuffle of a raccoon. A bipedal, heavy step. Crunch, crunch, crunch. It was coming from the side of the clearing, not the road. Someone was walking out of the deep woods. I stood up, my hand instinctively going to the knife clipped to my pocket. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice cracked. The footsteps stopped. For 10 seconds there was nothing. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks upward. Then, a voice came from the darkness, just beyond the reach of my firelight. It was a man's voice, raspy, dry, like he had not used it in days. "That smells good," the voice said. "The meat." A figure stepped into the halo of the fire. He was tall, maybe 6'2", but gaunt. He wore a red flannel shirt that had faded to pink, covered in dark, greasy stains. His jeans were torn at the knees. He was not wearing hiking boots. He was wearing old, cracked leather work boots that looked 3 sizes too big for him. But it was his face that made my stomach drop. He looked normal, but not. His skin was pale, almost translucent, stretching too tight over his cheekbones. His eyes were wide, unblinking, reflecting the firelight like a cat's. He was smiling, but the smile did not reach his eyes. It was just a baring of teeth. Yellow, jagged teeth. "Just finishing up," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I took a step back, putting the fire between us. "Can I help you?" The man did not answer immediately. He looked at the empty skillet sitting on the rock. He looked at my tent. He looked at the Subaru. He was cataloging my gear. "Nice setup," he said. He took a step closer. The smell of cheap cologne and copper hit me like a wave. It was nauseating. "You out here all by yourself, Mark?" I froze. He did not say Mark like a name. He said it like a noun, like a target. Or maybe I was imagining it. Maybe he just said Mac or Buddy. "My friends are on their way," I lied. The lie came out too fast. "They went into town for more beer. They'll be back any minute." The man tilted his head. His neck moved with a weird, jerky motion, like a bird's. "Friends," he repeated. He looked at the single chair by the fire. He looked at the single beer bottle. Lot of gear for one man waiting on friends. "They coming?" I insisted, my hand tightening on the knife in my pocket. "Look, man, this is a private campsite. If you looking for the trail, it's south back down the road." He laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "The trail, right?" He took another step. He was now within 5 feet of the fire. I could see the grime under his fingernails. They were long, broken, and black with dirt. "I do not want trouble," I said, pitching my voice lower, trying to sound authoritative. "But you need to move on." The man stopped. He stared at me. For a full minute he just stared. He did not blink. I swear to God, he did not blink once. The firelight danced in his pupils, but there was no life behind them. It was like looking into the eyes of a shark. "Water," he said suddenly. "Just need some water. Throat is dry." I hesitated. If I gave him water, would he leave? Or would it be an invitation? "Okay," I said, "Stay there." I reached down to my cooler, keeping my eyes on him. I grabbed a bottle of smart water. I tossed it to him. He caught it with unnatural speed. His hand snatched it out of the air like a cobra strike. He did not open it. He just held it, staring at me. "Thank you," he said. The way he said it made my skin crawl. It was mocking. "You got your water," I said. "Now go." He nodded slowly. "I'm going. Do not worry. I'm going." He turned around. But he did not walk toward the road. He walked straight toward the edge of the ravine, into the dense brush where there was no trail. "Hey!" I called out. "Road's that way." He did not stop. He did not look back. He just stepped into the darkness and vanished. I stood there for 5 minutes, listening. I heard the brush rustle for a moment, and then nothing. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked at the fire. It was dying down. The darkness was pressing in closer. My first instinct was to pack up and leave. Just throw everything in the car and drive. But then the rationalizer kicked in. "You being paranoid," the voice in my head said. "He was just a local. Maybe a homeless guy living in the woods. He looked weird. Sure, but he did not attack you. He asked for water and he left. You a grown man. You have a knife. You have a car. You not gonna let some meth head scare you out of your trip." I looked at the time. 8:15 p.m. If I packed up now, I'd be doing it in the dark. Fumbling with tent poles, trying to stuff the sleeping bag. It would be a mess. And I'd have to drive back down that winding gravel road at night. "It's fine," I whispered. "It's gone." I threw 3 more logs on the fire, building it up until it was roaring. I decided I would stay up for another hour, just to be sure. If nothing happened, I'd go to sleep. I sat in the chair, the knife now resting on my lap. I did not read. I just watched the tree line. Every shadow looked like him. Every rustle of leaves sounded like those heavy boots. At 9:30 p.m., the wind died down completely. The woods went silent again. That heavy, suffocating silence. I let the fire burn down to coals. I could not stay out here all night. I needed to sleep. The tent was safe. It was a barrier. A thin nylon barrier, sure, but psychologically, it felt like a fortress. I doused the fire with the remaining water from my jug, stirring the ashes until they were cold mud. Total darkness engulfed the campsite. I clicked on my headlamp, a black diamond spot 350. The beam cut a cone of white light through the black. I walked to the tent, unzipped the fly, and crawled inside. Zip. The sound of the zipper closing was the loudest thing in the world. I took off my boots, placing them in the vestibule. I stripped down to my thermal layers, Smartwool Merino 250 base layer top and bottom. I crawled into the sleeping bag. I lay on my back, staring up at the dark mesh of the tent ceiling. I had my car keys in one hand and my knife in the other. "Just close your eyes," I told myself. "In the morning, the sun will be up, you'll make coffee, and this will just be a creepy story to tell the guys at work." I must have dozed off. I do not know for how long. I woke up because of the sound. It was faint, a rhythmic, wet sound. Slap, drag, slap, drag. I stopped breathing. My eyes shot open, straining against the absolute darkness inside the tent. The sound was coming from outside, near the fire ring, maybe 15 feet away. Slap, drag. It sounded like a hand running along the side of the Subaru. I lay perfectly still, my grip on the knife handle making my knuckles ache. My hearing was dialed up to 11. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The sound moved. It was coming closer to the tent. Then I heard the breathing. It was not the panting of an animal. It was slow, wheezing inhales, wet, rattling exhales, like someone with fluid in their lungs. It was right outside the tent. Sniff. A long, deep inhale. Sniff. Then a whisper. It was so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. But I did not. It was right by my head, separated only by the thin nylon wall and the rainfly. Mark. My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. How did he know my name? I had not told him. The car, I realized with a jolt of horror. My registration. Did I leave it on the seat? No. My gear. My cooler. I wrote my name on the cooler with a Sharpie. Mark. The voice whispered again. Are your friends here yet? I clamped my hand over my mouth to stop a scream. Tears pricked my eyes. I did not move. I did not breathe. If I am silent, maybe he'll think I am asleep. Maybe he'll leave. The silence stretched for an eternity. Then I saw it. The moon must have come out from behind a cloud, because a faint, silvery light filtered through the rainfly. And against that light, a shadow pressed. A hand. He was pressing his hand against the side of the tent. I could see the outline of the fingers. Long, skeletal, spreading out against the fabric. The fabric depressed, inching toward my face. He pushed harder. The nylon strained. He was feeling for me. I shrank back, pressing myself against the far side of the tent, trembling so hard the sleeping pad crinkled beneath me. Please do not unzip it. Please God, do not unzip it. The hand slid down the fabric. The sound of dry skin on nylon was like sandpaper. Scritch. He moved to the front of the tent, to the vestibule, where the zipper was. I saw the shadow of his head now, that misshapen oval silhouette. He was crouching right in front of the door. He started to hum, a low, discordant melody. No tune I recognized, just a vibrating hum that seemed to vibrate in my own teeth. He reached for the zipper. I saw the fabric bunch as his fingers found the toggle. I gripped the knife with both hands, pointing it at the door. I was going to die here. I was going to die in a tent in Pisgah National Forest, and nobody would find me for weeks. The zipper moved. An inch. Zzz. He stopped. You reawake, are not you? He whispered. I did not answer. I could not. My throat was paralyzed. He giggled. A wet, bubbling giggle. I can hear your heart, he said. So loud. He let go of the zipper. The shadow stood up. He loomed over the tent, blocking out the moonlight. I'll wait, he said. And then, silence. He did not walk away. I did not hear footsteps. I did not hear the brush moving. He just stopped moving. He was standing right there. Just standing. Waiting. I lay there for hours. Every muscle in my body was locked tight. I was sweating, soaking the expensive merino wool, but I was freezing cold. 1 o'clock a.m. 2 o'clock a.m. 3 o'clock a.m. Every time the wind blew, I flinched. Every time a leaf fell on the tent, I almost swung the knife. Was he still there? Was he watching? At some point, around 4 o'clock a.m., my bladder was screaming. The pain was excruciating. But I would have wet myself before I unzipped that door. I held it. I held it until I thought I would burst. I must have passed out from pure exhaustion around dawn. It was not sleep. It was a biological shutdown. I woke up to light. Bright, harsh sunlight hitting the gray nylon. I gasped, sitting up, slashing the knife through the empty air. Silence. Birds were singing. A woodpecker was drilling into a tree nearby. Normal sounds. I looked at the door. The zipper was still closed, exactly where it had been. I listened. Nothing but the woods. I waited 10 minutes, then 20. Finally, I summoned every ounce of courage I had. I reached for the zipper. Zip. I threw the flap open and scrambled out, knife raised, ready to fight. The campsite was empty. The sun was shining through the trees. The fire pit was cold ash. The Subaru sat there, gleaming in the morning light. I spun around, checking the perimeter. Nothing. I almost collapsed with relief. It was a nightmare, I thought. A stress dream. He left after I gave him the water and my brain made up the rest. I stood up straight, sheathing the knife. I needed to pee. I walked over to the edge of the clearing. That S when I saw the tent. I walked back to my MSR Hubba Hubba. The gray rainfly was covered in morning dew, except for one spot. Right next to where my head had been, there was a handprint. It was not a shadow. It was a smear, a greasy, blackish-red smear on the light gray fabric. 5 long fingers, and below it, Scratched into the dirt with a stick or a finger were words. Nice knife. I did not pack. I did not break down the tent. I grabbed my keys. I grabbed my wallet from the tent pocket. I jumped into the Subaru, locked the doors, and started the engine. I reversed so fast I almost hit a tree. I left the tent. I left the $300 cooler. I left the chair. I left everything. I drove down that gravel road at 50 miles an hour, the suspension bottoming out, rocks slamming against the undercarriage. I did not breathe until I hit the pavement of Route 276. I drove 4 hours straight back to Raleigh. I did not stop for gas. I did not turn on the radio. I sold the Subaru the next week. I could not stand the smell of the interior anymore. Every time I got in, I thought I smelled cheap cologne and copper. I never went back for my gear. 2 months later, I was scrolling through a local news site. A small article caught my eye. Body found in Pisgah National Forest. A hiker had found a shallow grave off Forest Service Road 475B. The body was identified as a missing camper from South Carolina. He had been dead for 3 months. The police were looking for a person of interest, a drifter known to frequent the area. They did not have a name, but they had a description from other hikers who had reported strange encounters. Tall, gaunt, wearing a red flannel shirt. And then the detail that made me throw up in my sink. Suspect is believed to be wearing the victim's boots. I still check my locks. 1, 2, 3. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind hits my apartment window just right, I hear it. And I know that somewhere in the deep woods, my tent is still standing. And he's waiting for me to come back for it.